There have been a lot of bad movies based on video games, but Pokemon Detective Pikachu probably isn't one of them. So this review is going to be fairly spoiler-free. Let's start with a recap of the story that we know from the trailer. Tim goes to Rhyme City to find out what happened to his dad, and he works with Detective Pikachu, who suspects that Dad may have faked his own death. So already from the opening of the film, there is something I would change, because the first few scenes are about Tim saying how much he hates his dad. Tim says his dad was absent during childhood, he never went to see him, he never got to hang out with his dad. So suddenly when Dad goes missing, there's a bit of a gear change and Tim says, "Oh, I need to find out what happened to my dad." Well, why? You've just spent the opening of the film telling us how much you hate the guy and don't care about him. So I would have probably given that a rewrite. It doesn't take much creativity to have a narrative where Tim really loves his dad, but he's away working in the big city, and then suddenly we're on board for the rest of the journey. Like, if you want us to come with you on that journey of, I need to find out what happened to my beloved dad, then you kind of need to set us up for that a little bit. And they go heavy on the absent dad stuff. There are a few moments in the film where there's, I guess, a speech or a monologue. There are no jokes in it. And I remember I was watching it with my friend Yusuf, and there were times where we turned to each other and were like, geez, like, lighten up a bit. Like, if this is supposed to be a fun film, a jolly Pokemon safari, it is not. Now, I've read a few of the early reviews that say the story of the film is quite sloppy, and I'd probably agree with that, but it is just supposed to be a fun Pokemon adventure. It's not supposed to be an Oscar-winning masterpiece, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. If I compare it to the last Pokemon film I saw, which was The Power of Us, it's leagues above that. Power of Us, I felt like, was translated from Japanese into English without them ever seeing what the original Japanese script was. There were so many lines in that where I was just like, what are you talking about? So Pokemon Detective Pikachu is a much better story than that. Now, there were a few bits of the film that I thought were weirdly 90s, and not 90s in a paying homage to the 90s kind of way, but like 90s in a, why is this in a modern day film? It's a bit strange. For example, Lucy, her storyline as the co-star is that she's desperate to become a cable news reporter. And that reminds me a lot of April in the Ninja Turtles. Like, why is she so desperate to be on cable TV? That seems a bit weird and 90s to me. The film is also probably not that strong as a detective movie. Like, it lacks those moments where there's a big twist where you're like, that's a clue, that's going to lead us to where it's going. Obviously, there are some clues that are solved as the story progresses, but it lacks those moments where you're properly floored by the revelations. Let's talk about something the film gets absolutely right, and I would say that is the Pokemon characters. Now, a lot of people were horrified when they first saw the trailer and saw that furry Pikachu. That never bothered me so much. Like, I was quite used to Pikachu being furry. I had that original plush toy, which I've had for about 10 years, so I'm used to that. But actually, in the context of the film, you don't think the Pokemon look that weird at all. It's perhaps a bit unusual to see them with furry textures or scaly skin, but the crucial thing is the characters look right. They look like they are, and we know it's so easy to get this wrong. If you look at what's happened with the reaction to the Sonic trailer, it's very easy to design a character that just looks wrong, that doesn't look like the character it's supposed to be. Thankfully, the Pokemon in this film do look largely like you'd expect them to, although they did shy away from doing the really obscure ones. Like, there are Pokemon in the game that look like basically just an ice cream or a microwave, and they've kind of shied away from putting those ones in the film. One of my favourite things about this film is that it tells a story based in the Pokemon universe that is not purely just about Pokemon battles. So a lot of the animated films that we've seen before focus heavily on the battles, and they're very angsty, and they're about being the best and capturing the most Pokemon and saving the world via the art of the Pokemon battle. And that's not really what this film is like, and that's really refreshing. As a Pokemon fan, I feel like they could have perhaps squeezed in a few more in-jokes from the Pokemon world, maybe some references to the original anime or some lines in the game, but ultimately you come away from the cinema feeling that was fun, that was enjoyable, and that's a good thing.